Yeah, hi everyone. This is Clay from Cool Stuff Tech and More, and I'm going to do uh, a lesson for beginners on mixing boards. We're going to talk about the smallest board that I've got, which is just a few channels here. We're going to talk about some 16 channel boards, analog and digital. I've got a Mackie analog board, 16 channel. I've got a digital board, but why do you need a mixing board? Let's just take a look at if you were a one-person band and all you did was play guitar or all you did was sing. Let me just show you the simplest configuration. This is a Mackie powered speaker. It's got an amplifier as well as a speaker in it, and it's got an input that can accept a microphone. So what I've done here is I've taken this, it's actually an instrument mic that I am going to use as a vocal mic. It works as both. If you run that mic into this input over here and turn on the mixer and maybe give it a little bit of gain. Testing, testing, testing. Hopefully you can hear that that's coming through the speaker. Let me turn it up a little bit further. Test, testing, test. Now, what's the problem with this? Well, what if I play guitar and sing? I would now have to share my mic with the guitar and the vocals. So we need some way that we can bring multiple channels in. I know that's a simple concept, but if you've never dealt with pro audio before, that might not be so simple. So that's what the need of a mixing board is. And its main job is to take multiple instruments and mix them together and output that as a stereo signal, left and right. And in a lot of cases, you might not even need stereo. You might only need mono. But most mixers are stereo mixers. They have a left and right output. Let me just stop right there for a second. We're going to start out with the smallest mixer that I own, and that's this little Behringer mixer. And my inputs on that are, I've got XLR or 1/4 inch, balanced or unbalanced. I don't know if I can zoom in there where you can see. And I'll explain what unbalanced and balanced are in a minute. But you can see I've got 2 XLR, balanced, unbalanced inputs. Then I've got line in 3/4, line in 5/6. And you've got left and right. So those are 1/4 inch, and those are also balanced or unbalanced. But you don't have the XLR input. You just have the 1/4 inch. So this is a 6-channel mixer. And we're just going to start with the basics. There are some advanced topics that I'll cover very briefly, but we're going to save those for, control rooms, for example. Not everybody using a little mixer like this is going to worry about a control room. They're going to use it maybe just for 1 or 2 instrument mixing, and they're not going to have a control room. It'll be used in a live environment. And just so that you know what this device is, they still sell them. I've seen them. I don't know if they're used or if they're still selling them new, but this is made by Behringer, and it's a Eurorack MX602A. And the only thing I've got plugged in right now is the power to it. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to add our microphone. And here's the mic I'm going to be using. And we're just going to take that and plug it into input 1. Like so. Then we're going to go ahead and we're going to take our left. Here's your main outs over on this side. So we're going to take our main out and our left and right. All right, so just make sure we're focused. So the first thing I want to do is I want to do a level set on this. And one of the disadvantages of a small mixing board like this is you don't have pre-fader level control. That would normally be a button that you would press somewhere on the channel strip. And what it would allow you to do is use your input gain, and this is a little dial. So you'd start out with 0 because you have no idea how loud this signal is going to be. And you would bring it up slowly, test, 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 that sort of thing, watching your level meters over here. But unfortunately, with a little mixer like this, I can't do pre-fader level control. And pre-fader simply means I'm not going to be taking my signal through. This is normally a fader on a larger mixing board where you've got your slider, and this one just, probably because it's cheaper, they've got your level here. So I can't do that. Here's the only way I can do level testing. And this will be one of the things when we get to the larger mixing boards, you'll appreciate how it's better to have a PFL or a pre-fader level control. So here's what I have to do. If I turn this gain up, I'm going to turn it up halfway. Test, test, test. There's nothing coming out. Test, test, test. You don't see anything over here. Let me just focus again. You don't see anything over here. I should be seeing some sort of movement as I'm making sound. You have to actually bring up this level control and have your main mix level. I'm going to bring that up about half, and I'm just going to start out slow here. Test, test, test. Now you can see the light starting to flash. So you're basically setting this up live. I mean, test, test, test. And so as you're playing, if you are going to turn up anything on here, you might actually go beyond what the input is supposed to be. You don't really want to get above, you can see 0 here, and then it gets yellow, and then you got red. So you don't really want that red to go off. You want the yellow to maybe go off once in a while, which is probably, let's see if we can get zoomed in there and look at it. I can't tell if that's 6 dB or not. We'll have to look at that after we process the video. But a lot of times it's +3, +5, depending on what the headroom is of the mixing board and what it can handle. You don't want it to start clipping your amplifier. And with digital mixers, it'll really sound terrible. Basically, they just cut out when you get above the headroom, the maximum volume that they can handle. Because they're trying to turn an analog signal into digital, and if you're beyond the capability of what it's able to process, it doesn't put out a signal. Now, analog at least tries to, but it'll be a distorted signal. All right, so test, 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 test. I just want to see test, 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 test. So we're not even coming close to clipping, and test, 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 test. Now I'm going to actually have to bring down my level over here because it's just getting too loud. Test, 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 test. So it's a real, balancing act. Test, test, when you don't have pre-fader level ability. So anyway, for me, the best thing is to do it by ear. You see what volume you need, and kind of go by that. A combination of the gain, the input, and your main section, your main left and right output. Okay, so going down the channel strip, after you've got your level set, you've also got EQ. And almost all mixing boards I've ever seen have high, mid, and low EQ settings. So that's your treble is high, your mid-range is in the middle, and bass frequencies are the third one down. So I don't know if you can hear this, but test, 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 test. Whoops. You get up to a point where the highs start a feedback loop. So you got to watch that too. I can also bring my volume down a little bit. Test, test. Okay, so the next, and you could go the opposite way too. Test, 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 test. So you can hear it becoming a little bit bassy as I drop the high. Same thing with mid. Test, 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 test. Gets a little crisper, and you start getting to that point where you've got a reverb or a feedback loop happening. And then if I drop it, test, 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 test. gets bassier sounding. The low frequency, test, 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 test. You can tell it's getting a little hollow as I increase it. Test, 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 and it gets a little crisper as I drop it down. So those are individual tastes, how you want to hear that. You might want to leave it right up the middle and, play around with it. Most mixing boards will have at least one aux port. And if you look on this one, it's actually got aux send and return. So you could use this in one of two ways. And first I'm going to do is find it for you. Okay, so here's your aux send right here. The aux return is stereo, left and right. So I can send it a mono signal. If I send it to a stereo effects processor, I'm going to get right and left back because it's a stereo effect. So you'd have one cable plugging in here and the send that goes to an effects processor. And then possibly, if you're only going to have one return, it's not a stereo effect, you're going to, use the mono return. But if it's a stereo effect, you'll bring two back, a right and a left. And that comes back into the mixing board. And then you get your reverb, delay, whatever the effect is. Now, how do I control how much of my signal goes to that? That's what this guy does over here. So you're taking this channel and you're determining how much of that signal you want to send to the aux processor. Now, you don't have to use the aux to go to an effect. Let's just say that your guitarist wants to have a monitor. And he doesn't want to hear the whole band in the monitor. He only wants to hear bass and drums in the monitor. You could take just the aux send. You can take just that aux send, control the volume that goes to it, and that can be the monitor. And then you determine which instruments you want to send to that monitor with these. Channel 1 and 2, I might want to send to that monitor, and then these two I don't want to send, so I'll keep them off. All right. Almost every mixing board I've ever seen has pan. If it's stereo, it's going to have pan left and right, so you can determine if you want more of your instrument going to the left or to the right. Now, most of the time, you're going to keep it in the middle. But drums are one area where you might want to shift things left and right. Sometimes people want to have the bass drum more on the right side, the snare drum more on the left side, and then the toms from your high rack tom down to your lowest floor tom, they want those to pan left to right, almost like you're sitting in front of the drums. So you can do that with your pan. Each channel can be set individually and then level. All right, so you've got each one of these channels has input levels, and then the main mix you can determine how loud you want to go out to your amplifier or to your powered speakers. Control room, it's almost a joke that a little mixing board like this would have control room anything, but phones/control room, you've got a separate level control for that, and you've got two buttons that determine how these tape input and outputs work. We're going to save those for another day. That's not something we need to cover here, but I think that probably, and you do have control room left and right here. I'll say this about control room. If you had a control room where they're doing the recording and the mixing to create a CD or a demo tape, you do have, your control that determines how much of this signal is going to go to the control room. Your left and right main outputs are typically going into the recording space so that your musicians can hear what they're playing. But the control room, you might want to have a separate set of speakers in there, and they're isolated sonically from what's going on in the actual space that the musicians are playing their instruments in. So let me just show you test. We're still, coming out here, and test. I can turn that on and off with this. Test. That's our main mix output. But I can move these over to control room. Let's just make sure we're focused in there. I'm going to move these over to the control room, and you'll see this will control the volume for the control room. Testing. So you've got separate controls, mix versus control room. We'll save the rest of the discussion on control room for another day, but I hope you got something out of this. That's the small Behringer mixing board, 6-channel mixing board. All right, I promised that I would mention balanced versus unbalanced connections, cables, and forgot to do it. So let's talk about that. Mixing boards can support both in most cases. A balanced connector or cable has 3 wires in it. And an XLR is a good example of that. You've got 3 wires, 3 physical connections. One of those is your signal. One of those is a return on that signal. And then one of them is a ground, typically like shielded, grounded. So it helps with noise. It helps keep everything grounded and lower noise. Now, the other type of end is a 1/4-inch jack. So how do you tell if a 1/4-inch jack supports, a balanced or unbalanced connection? All right, so my drum mics are a good example of how to check that out. So here's one of the connections for my drum mics. I would plug the microphone into this jack, and you can see this is my white one. I've got like 8 or 10 of these guys coming out of a snake cable. So I know this is going to be a balanced connection, or it should be, unless they're fooling me and putting a connector with three wires on it. But let me look at the other end of this where it goes into the mixing board. This would be the end that would plug into one of the microphones on the drums. I'm just not using it. It's an extra. If I look at that other end of that, where the 1/4-inch is, you're going to see, if I can get zoomed in on it here, you're going to see 3 different parts to this, and they're called tip, ring, and sleeve. Tip is the end of it. Ring is that little ring in the middle. You can see black separators on either part. That is a separate connector. And this is called the sleeve. Tip, ring, sleeve. And that comes from the origins of our telephones. Patchboard operators used to use these exact 1/4-inch cables on switchboards back in the 1930s and 40s. And we shorten this type of connector and we call it a TRS. Tip, ring, sleeve is a balanced 1/4-inch connector. Now, I'll show you an unbalanced one. And this is a patch cord that I have over here. And you can see there's only 2 conductors on that. There's the tip, there's no ring, and there's a sleeve. So this would be an unbalanced connection. All right. There's one other thing I forgot to mention on here, and that is a lot of microphones need 48 volts, plus 48 volts phantom power applied to one of the conductors. And I'm not sure which one it is, probably the signal, but most boards support that. Let me see if we can get zoomed in here and focused. And you can see there is a switch for plus 48 volts, and that little light comes on to let you know that when that's pushed, oh wait, yeah, it's got 48 volt lights on. Well, that's interesting. The light seems to stay on all the time, even though I've got the switch off. Okay, very interesting. I'll have to check it out. It normally doesn't do that. When you deselect 48 volts, in most cases, that light would go out on other mixing boards. For some reason, it stays on this one. All right. Okay, so that's it. I hope that helped.